Hello there, my name is Joy Poe. This is my Chart of Accounts screencast for ENT 640, Entrepreneurial Feasibility and Analysis. I used the idea of painting parties for this chart of accounts. I recently retired from massage therapy. I closed my practice about 2 months ago now, and since I needed something to do through the summer, I decided that I'd start offering some paint parties. These are things that I've done in the past, just kind of on the side, wine shops and people's houses, but it looks like there's a lot of people who are interested in doing this, and so I've kind of just wanted to see what the startup costs would be, what exactly I would need to buy, what I might actually be selling, and what it might cost me to continue to do this. And then also just considering the fact that I'd like to open Worthwhile Studio, which is many of you are already familiar with this idea of opening a working artist studio. And so I thought this would be a good way to test the market and see what people are interested in. So let me tell you a little bit about the idea. Again, paint parties where I bring the art supplies and you bring the beer or wine or whatever else, snacks, food, cheese, whatever it is that you like to eat or drink. And I will bring everything you need to make a piece of art. And I think of this as kind of testing the market for popular art classes and the interest, getting an idea of what kind of things people would like to paint, what kind of art they'd like to make. It doesn't necessarily have to be painting. And then I think of it also as a way to make connections and build my mailing list for future endeavors, specifically if I'd really like to start offering some heavy-duty classes for workshops, master classes, which I envision in the larger plan of Worthwhile Studio. And then again, just helping me realize the startup expense, revenue generators, and ongoing expenses of this idea. And some of the chart areas I did kind of grow it into the idea that maybe I would rent a studio space, or maybe I would start an online business or something along those lines. So there are kind of options to grow kind of feeling about my chart of accounts. And then I would like to use the knowledge gained to grow into that full dream of owning a working artist studio. So let's open up the Excel charts and we'll talk about the numbers. So I'm going to begin with startup expenses, and we're going to be talking about the amount that I anticipate it costing, and then the validation that might go with that particular cost. So I'll begin with marketing here, and I spoke with Andy Sigsby from Beets and Okra Graphic and Web Design. She quoted me $750 for a website and $200 for a logo. I assume that it's not going to cost a lot to get just a little bit of business for painting parties, because a lot of it's going to be word of mouth. So I average maybe $150 a month for the first 3 months, and so basically a startup cost of $450 for advertising kind of set aside. And then printed marketing materials being, business cards, brochures, maybe some postcards or something that people can take along with them and pass on to their friends. The next would be supplies, and here I did actually create another chart, my startup supply charts, and I have ongoing needs and then other supplies that you might buy at the beginning, but when they start wearing out, you might need to purchase more. So that total came up to $941.33. Some of these things I had already bought at Michael's. Other things that I know that I would purchase in the future if I were to do, say, some mixed media classes or stamping classes or some other things that would be really fun to do for an art party. And then again, aprons and palettes and, tabletop easels, maybe a hand cart to carry everything with. And then just the crafty things you would need, scissors and, and whatnot. So I'd also like to point out that there is the possibility, I bought a lot of these things at Michael's, but I would need to research, if I were to continue doing this, I'd need to research how to get some wholesale prices on paint, because paint can add up pretty quickly as well as the canvases. So we'll go back to our startup expenses, and that is where my $941.33 came from. Licenses, I have not really found that licenses are going to cost me a lot of money. Transylvania County Register of Deeds, I was referred there from the NCDOV DOR, Department of Revenue said to, check with your Register of Deeds, and there is no cost for a business license. Neither is there cost for the sales tax license. And again, kind of growing into the idea that, hey, say instead I just started, a studio right off the bat. Heath Seymour at the Heart of Brevard is a big proponent for the arts in the downtown area, and he had quoted me a studio space above a local shop for $450. It might be large enough for fitting, say, 6 to 8 people in if I wanted to teach a class. And then I assume I would need some studio furnishings, and I did kind of just educate a guest to purchase a few tables and chairs and storage for a studio space. And then also here I kind of included some workshop space rental and fees. That kind of accounts for the idea that if I were to do a paint party, say at a wine shop, that, we would charge $35 and she would take, say, 15% of that. So I think it would be really hard to tell until I start getting a lot of parties, because some of them may not take a fee from the space. So, and then the next thing, if I were to decide to do online courses, I would need camera and lighting equipment, and most of those things I already own. I was a photographer in a past life, so I have quite a bit of camera equipment. Next up, we have ongoing expenses. And again, my time unit is every 3 months, 1 class per week with 10 students per class. When I was getting my chart vetted through Jan Drusilius, he was a CPA for 40 years in Texas for corporations, and he pointed out that I might not, this number 10 may not be the best number to consider. He said, when we get down to brass tacks, I might not really want 10 students in class, much less always get 10 students. So he thinks that that's kind of a high percentage. But if I were to have 1 class per week with 10 students per class, this is kind of what I assume would be, the cost of using the materials and having new things to buy. And these are the expenses I would assess every few months, every 6 months, to decide if I need to repurchase some of those items that may get worn out, but you don't necessarily replace. And then finally, if I can get to it, I may need to move my thing for a second here. Pardon me, it's hidden underneath. And then we'll go on to our revenue generators, which I think is the fun page. So I would point out that I get really excited about the idea of making art classes. So some of the simpler classes that I imagine doing, especially here in the summertime with some people, just trying to find out what people might enjoy painting specifically. Pet portraits, a master painter class where you copy a master painting of Van Gogh or something like that. Perhaps a house portrait, a flower painting, and then maybe a still life. And again, $40 per student. I'm beginning to think that that might be a little bit high. And again, going back to our 10 students per class, that may not happen. Although most of the time I have at least 12 to 15 in classes. So I don't think that the 10 is too big for this particular subject of classes, but $40 may be a little high. I think paint parties can charge anywhere from $25 to $40, so I think it might land somewhere in the $30 or to $25 range. Next up would be arts and crafts workshops, which a lot of these I do at the wine shop as well. Mixed media classes, postcard art, holiday specials such as gift tags and bags, and charging a little bit less. The mixed media requires a lot more material, so I charged a little bit more per student. And then moving on to the idea of growing into a kind of a grown-up art studio. Perhaps if I had a studio class or a studio place to offer classes, I would offer some master classes, workshops for, a more intensive group of students, life drawing, still life, and maybe even a class on like creativity or drawing the body through body landmarks. And I've charged more. And this is kind of where Jan had asked if I really wanted 10 students in, say, a workshop or a master class, because I might want to offer them more personal instruction. And then private art lessons. Again, I'm kind of just thinking $30, $35 an hour, 1 student a month, if they come once a week. But I may not have, 2 or 3 in painting and then 1 in drawing or something like that. I don't know exactly. But I think the revenue per month might be, say, $4.20 for all of this private art lessons. And then considering I finished my entrepreneurship degree here, I might branch out into arts business consulting, and then hopefully just begin making some artwork again. And then I think several people had mentioned that considering the possibility of doing online art courses, that is exciting to me. I don't know exactly how I feel about recording and videotaping myself, but you never know. And so I added it here, the idea of how much I might charge, especially as a beginner, in the $175 range. But then adding on to it, course supply kits where you might send all the art supplies to the person who pays here, and then perhaps they purchase an ebook as well. So that kind of covers everything, and I hope that makes sense. I hope you got a good picture of what I envision happening as I start these paint parties over the summer, and hopefully as I learn more in the entrepreneurship program, growing into the possibility of really being able to open an art studio as a working artist and offering some of these classes with the wealth of knowledge that I have from my art background. So thank you for watching, and I appreciate your time.